Hi everyone, welcome back to another video about my solar PV system and energy consumption. This is my November update video to give you the statistics and also, well, these videos, they're not just about the numbers, they're about trying to convey a message of, is it any good? Does it work? How does it work? What are the differences? What does it mean to you? Those sort of things. So if you're thinking about going with solar PV on the roof, you could watch this suite of videos and see what the experience is like from day one and the excitement to perhaps months like this where there isn't a lot of sun, and to be honest, it's pretty miserable. So it's the 4th of December today that I'm filming this video, so a few days after November, and as you can see out of the backdrop there, that doesn't look too bad, does it? It doesn't look like an awful, horrible winter's day, but November has been awful. It's been as black and rainy and cold and miserable as you could ever believe. In fact, so much so, it's made me think about asking the question, is solar any use whatsoever in the UK? Is it an appropriate country to put solar on your roof, and especially in the winter? What does it work like? Is it any good? So before we get to answer that sort of question, I need to go through some of the numbers with you on how much sun there's been, how the solar systems have performed for us here, and yeah, there's been a pretty good observation about the solar edge inverter as well. So let's cover the details first and then try and sum it up and answer the question. Is solar any good in the UK?
We have two separate solar arrays totaling 6.3 kilowatts. The first was installed in January last year, 14 280 watt panels, a total of 3.9 kilowatts, and the second, 8 panels, 300 watts each, total of 2.4 kilowatts. The first array uses a Solis inverter of 3.6 kilowatts, and the latest array uses a solar edge inverter 2 kilowatts, with optimization on every 2 panels in pairs. The only problem with having 2 arrays and 2 separate inverters is the data. The data is different between the two. I get this sort of data and graph from my Solis inverter, and then I get this sort of information from Solar Edge. I've added the watt node Modbus meter, which gives me import and export information, as well as what I'm generating, but it doesn't show me on this chart what I'm generating on my first solar array. So I have to add the two together and create in Excel this sort of graph that shows a combination of the two. So my solar generation for the month of November is 141.9 kilowatt hours on my first array, 81.58 kilowatt hours on the second array, giving me a total of 223.5 for the month, lower than even February last year. So if we take those two numbers, 141.9 and 81.58, what we can see is the Solar Edge solution that I have is generating 57.5% of what the first array is generating. But if I compare the maximum output of the arrays, I should be getting 61.5%. If we look at the worst, dullest day for the month, then we generated 0.9 kilowatt hours on the first array with the Solis inverter, and on the Solar Edge system we generated 0.278 kilowatt hours. Look at those numbers and it comes out to 31%. And that's with the panels that are connected to the Solar Edge inverter being at the top of the roof, where it should actually be getting better performance. Quite simply, the Solar Edge inverter is not performing anywhere near as well as the Solis inverter in dull conditions. In bright sunny days, we're seeing in excess of 61%, so it's only on dull days Solar Edge isn't doing the business. So, how well did I utilise that solar power that I generated? Well, sadly I can't really tell, not accurately anyway, because the My Energy app hasn't been updated with accurate data going back for the entire month of November, and it's been out of date for over a month, so pretty disappointed with My Energy for not updating data. This chart though is quite indicative for the month of November, and yes, we have consumed about 90% of the electricity we've generated, which is pretty good. It highlights again that in my situation I wouldn't benefit from having a home storage battery, not very much during the winter anyway, because I'm not generating enough electricity or exporting enough to actually charge the battery to make use of it. Looking at the bottom chart here, yellow, which is supposed to be below the 0 kilowatt line, the yellow indicates whether I'm exporting energy to the grid. And you can see here for an entire week we exported 2.4 kilowatts, virtually nothing. And yes, I know we could charge a home storage battery from a flexible tariff on cheap electricity overnight, but that just doesn't suit us because we're a low consumer of electricity and therefore the benefit of doing so is really, really low. We're talking 30 pence a day saving in electricity costs by having a home storage battery charging it with cheap rate electricity. So for us, it just doesn't justify in winter having a home storage battery. Okay, moving on to my Kona Electric and charging it from the Zappy charger that I have. We travelled 861 miles and added 166.26 kilowatt hours of electricity, and it looks like a pretty much 50-50 split on energy coming from the grid and energy coming from solar power. And that's a big change this month. Normally I'm charging just from solar energy, or pretty much. Looking at those particular numbers, 861 miles, 166 kilowatts of electricity, of which 81.7 was from the grid, 13 pence a kilowatt hour, that's £11, 4 pence for the month, just 1.3 pence per mile. This chart shows when we've charged on a daily basis and also the state of charge of the car. So where the 10 kilowatt line is, that's 100% state of charge. And you can see in the first half of the month we were floating between 50% and about 80-90% state of charge. But in the second half of the month, because there was so little solar, the state of charge has dropped continuously below 50%. I only charged enough for the journeys that we were going to do, which begs the question, do I really need a 64 kilowatt hour Kona? And just to clarify, we didn't use any public chargers at all during November. Moving on to heating our hot water from solar energy through the MyEnergy Eddy device that we have. We've used 71 kilowatt hours this month. That's an average of 2.76 per day, and that's not enough to heat the hot water to an adequate temperature. So we have had to turn the oil boiler on and use oil to heat the hot water as well, probably for about 8-10 days maybe. So plugging those numbers into my main chart, which is this one, and also the amount of energy we've used from the grid this month, that's the blue bar chart at the bottom. That was 164 kilowatt hours for the month. So that's showing pretty much we've now risen back up to the same sort of level that we had in January, February, March. So yeah, winter consumption for me is about 164 kilowatt hours of electricity from the grid. What we can see here is on the orange line, that's the solar generation. That's continually come down and now it's only just over 200 kilowatt hours for the month. My energy I've used for the Kona Electric has actually gone up a little bit, so we've actually consumed more electricity, probably travelled just slightly further. And in red, that's the hot water. The energy we've used for the hot water has come down because there just wasn't enough solar energy to do the job. And that leads us back nicely to the question I asked at the beginning. Is solar PV in the UK worth having? Does it work? From my experience, I need a minimum of 400 kilowatt hours per month to be able to charge my Kona Electric, heat the hot water, and to run the house without using as much energy from the grid as possible. I think this chart shows it quite well. If you ignore the first bar, which was January, when we first installed the solar array in the middle of the month, so it's not complete. If you ignore that and look at the dark blue lines, you can see how many are above or close to the 400 mark. And we've got 3, 4, 5, 6 400 and above, and 1 just below. But if we add in the light blue, then we're going to be talking 9 months in the year where we're going to be close to or just over the 400 kilowatt hour mark. So for me, it looks like the array that I've got now at 6.3 kilowatts is enough for 9 months of the year. Only 3 months of the year where we're going to be talking the darkest in winter and the shortest daylight hours, those aren't going to be adequate to heat the hot water, charge the car and run the house. There were 11 days in November where we generated between only 1 and 2 kilowatt hours of electricity. So that's not enough to do anything really, so we might as well have not had solar. And that's how it felt. It felt that we didn't have any at all. The reality though is that weather changes, and despite having 11 days of virtually no solar energy, there were plenty of others where we did have some. We still generated 224 kilowatt hours for the month, and that's half what we need really to do everything that we want. And we saw that from charging the car on the Zappy, didn't we? It was a 50% rate, half from the grid, half from solar energy. So does solar work in the UK? And the answer is yes. Some days, individual days, it feels like it doesn't. For an entire week there in November, it felt like it didn't. But overall, we are generating enough electricity to justify having the solar panels.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Especially if you've watched all the way through to the end, do appreciate that. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope there was some useful information there. Love to hear from you about your solar PV system, or if you're thinking of going solar, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. So leave some comments below. The chat is always good. More videos to come with solar updates on a monthly basis, and it's only 2 months away now, and I'll have an annual update to say what it's been like for an entire year, and I can most certainly compare back then to the estimations of what I was supposed to be generating and what my savings were like. Looking forward to doing that January update, so that'll be around February time. Anyway, thanks for watching again. See you all soon. Bye bye.